Welcome to Life with Jemma Blythe. This is your midweek coffee break, a pause for reflection, a sip of something warm, and a wander into the shadows where myths, mental health, and queer women's stories meet. Each week, we'll take a legend or a piece of folklore and turn it over, like a stone in your hand, to see what truths are hidden underneath. The eerie, the haunting, the half-forgotten. They all have something to tell us about survival, healing, and finding our own kind of magic. So, pour your coffee, settle in, let's step into the story.
Monsters are rarely born, they're made. And today we're meeting somebody who I didn't expect to meet, which is Medusa in the Mirror. She has more connections with female trauma survival, and so much so that I didn't really know much about her. So I was shocked when I went down my little rabbit hole and found out that we actually share more in common with this myth or Gorgon than I thought. So let's delve in and see what you find out along the way. It's going to be both shadowy and reflective this episode, so make sure you have your coffee with you as we do a deep dive into the myth and the legend that is Medusa. She was a woman who was born mortal, just like any of us. She lived in a temple, which was kind of weird and something that we can't relate to today. But things changed for her when she was raped in Athena's temple, and she was known as defiling Athena's temple because Poseidon raped her. And then Athena saw fit to punish Medusa by turning her into a Gorgon, a woman with snakes for hair, a gaze that could turn men to stone. And so that was what she is recognized to be today. Nobody really knew or knows who she was before that, which we will get onto later on in this episode. So there you have themes of victim blaming, monstrous transformation, exile, because Athena blamed her for what she'd been through. So in effect, what she'd been through turned her into this monster, and it turned her into something nobody can quite recognize, which, as you think about it today, is so hurtful, right? So then it carries on. So Perseus was tasked with killing Medusa. He located her lair and used Athena's shield so then he could find her without looking directly at her and becoming a victim of her gaze. And then he severed her head with a sickle. And so Pegasus was born from her body. Medusa's head retained the power to petrify. Perseus then took the head and presented it to Athena. Athena carried on using the head by affixing it to her shield. So even then, there was a kind of triumph that her death became by Perseus. So we have so much in that story, and there is so much that trauma survivors can relate to in that, right? There's victim blaming, monstrous transformation, exile, and then you've got the ultimate, like, congratulations when she's dead. I can't quite describe how powerful that is, but it gets stronger. So today we see Medusa as being a symbol, but not necessarily a symbol of what you might think. Medusa is seen as a feminist symbol, reclaimed by women, especially queer women survivors, and also artists, which I didn't expect. It's so weird. So no one truly knows what Medusa was like before she became a Gorgon that Athena turned her into. And you can only really estimate, and other people have suggested, that she was this beautiful goddess with equal looks and power to Athena. And it just suggests how much women, even back then, even when myths and legends were produced, were suppressed. And it's just easier sometimes to see women as the villains, and easier to write about two women who tore each other down, which is what you've got with Athena and Medusa. And it's right down to the misogynistic bare bones that is. And so survivors that are all too often blamed for their trauma have then taken solace in the shape that is Medusa, because she is somebody that trauma survivors can relate to. She is somebody that queer women can relate to. She is somebody that artists who have been suppressed can relate to. And then we've got the snakes that she had on her hair, and I love this symbolic. It's so symbolic because snakes throughout time have been associated with rebirth, transformation, because they shed their skin. Think about it. They shed their skin, and it becomes symbolic of them shedding what they've been through. So when we look at snakes, they are symbolic because we get reborn when we've been through things. We get reborn and we start different paths in our lives, and different ways that we travel means that we change direction quite spontaneously sometimes. And so next time you struggle, it may be a good idea to think of a snake shedding its skin. And that's been known across so many different cultures for shedding past experiences. And not only that, but it's become symbolic of immortality, healing, and spiritual awakenings too. And I love that. If we keep that thought within us and keep that idea, it strengthens us so much. And then you've got the gaze that Medusa had, and that was known as both a curse and a shield. And it can mirror the way that society kind of looks at female trauma survivors. Looking at trauma without support can be suggested as re-traumatizing. And that is similar to Perseus using the shield as reflection to process and heal from their experiences. So when trauma survivors heal from trauma, quite often they use reflection, journaling, all those different types of things to really get to the bare bones of what they've been through. And that's so similar to how Perseus used that shield of Athena's to be able to look directly at Medusa without staring her straight in the eyes with nothing in between, which is so powerful. So really, am I surprised that she's now known as a symbol for queer women, trauma survivors, and artists? No, I'm not shocked at all. Because sometimes when you've been through trauma, you need that relatability with somebody or with something else. So me just doing this research and going down this rabbit hole, it was so exciting to me because as a kid, I can't remember being taught about Medusa in this level. And it was just, so good to learn all about this. So think back to all the times that Medusa has gone through different things, but then similar things to what we go through today as humans. Survivors are blamed for their trauma, are they not? Like, what were you wearing? Why were you there? Where were you? You brought it on yourself. Are those all things that you've been asked if you've been through trauma? Or are they not? It's so easy to think that because this is a story, quote unquote, or this is a myth, or it's a legend, that it's so far off the truth. But it's really not when you start analysing and finding the relatable points of this. And then you've got queer women who are labelled as too angry or too much, and they're made to feel guilty because of who they are, ashamed because of who they are. But then when they start speaking about it and start articulating about somebody that they fancy, somebody that they're going out with, who so happens to be another woman, that gets too much. Medusa was always labelled to be too much, but she carried on. She survived. Think on that. And then you've got mental health stigma, turning people into monsters just because they weren't listened to, just because they needed help and nobody was there, or just because nobody gave them the space or the time, or when they lashed out because they were frustrated, people got into thinking that this is them being a monster, this is them lashing out, and this is them kind of not knowing who they are. So instead of being empathetic with people, they label them as monsters. And that's sometimes where the stigmas come from. And sometimes, a little bit like Medusa, you need to remember the people who they were and they are deep down. Sometimes all people need is just somebody there to understand, somebody to give them space to talk where they feel safe. So this got me thinking of what my coffee shop confession would be. And with this one, it relates to my gaze upon myself. When I was abused as a teenager, the guy who abused me, who was a lot older, used to make me look at my own reflection in a mirror and tell me how beautiful I was. Now, because of that, I spent years not looking at my own reflection in the mirror because I felt so ashamed, so guilty, and it took me ages to be able to do that. And one day I was in the garden centre with my mum, and there were Gothic mirrors that were set up to look like windows. And I looked into one. I caught my own gaze for the first time in I don't know how long in a mirror. And instead of seeing the victim who I thought I was, I saw the beautiful flowers behind me. And for the first time, I saw myself in those flowers as a survivor. And so people can look and appear to be something different inside than they are on the outside. But again, is that not similar to Medusa? She was something very different on the inside. On the inside, she was still mortal. She was still beautiful. A goddess similar to Athena, with equal beauty and power, who could have quite easily, instead of tearing each other down, they could have been the best of allies. And so now I say you survived, and that survival is your crown, to my own reflection in the mirror. So let's close off with some reflective prompts for you guys who are either watching or listening. Thank you so much. Okay, so the first one is, when have you felt monstrous because of others' labels? How can you reclaim that part as powerful? Okay. Now, I have a gentle ritual for you and a grounding tool. So the gentle ritual is, I want you to look in a mirror, not criticize yourself, no matter how hard that may seem. Keep the criticism, don't want it, bin it, and thank yourself for surviving. So, look in a mirror, don't criticize, thank yourself for surviving. Maybe even imagining yourself with snakes as guardians, not shame. That's so powerful. So, imagine yourself with Medusa hair to wear as guardians, not shame. Then I want you to put your hand on your heart, breathe steady, and then name 5 things in the room to anchor yourself when your shame spirals. So put your hand on your heart, breathe steady, and name 5 things in the room to anchor yourself when your shame spirals. And then I want to leave you with this. Medusa was punished for surviving, but her story doesn't have to end in beheading. It can end here with us reclaiming the monster, seeing her not as cursed but crowned. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again next Wednesday with another one. Much love. Bye.
Thank you for sharing this coffee break with me. If today's story stirred something in you, remember, you're not alone. The myths we carry are old.